is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Devin Baker, who is a writer, investor, and the founder of Comma Partners. It brings together a community of focused on leadership, practical philosophy, technology, and the future of work. Devin, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to dive in.
Great. So where are you calling from today?
Brooklyn, New York, here in Dumbo. Fall has hit us, so it's a good Thanksgiving week.
So tell us more about the founding story of Comma Partners and why is now the right time for this new model of crypto fund?
Yeah, it really all started with the rabbit hole that we call crypto. I got in, really fell in, found my way there in 2020, 2021, and just found just how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I missed Bitcoin in the last bull run, so called the 2017 era. And when it came around in 2020, I was like, I really need to give this thing a look. And once I started to try to understand what it was, what it meant, why it was important, or was it even important in the first place, I just became obsessed. And ultimately, the thing that really took me wasn't just, Bitcoin itself, but really once I started to understand and take a look at what this crypto technology was, what was blockchain tech, why was it different, why was it interesting, why did we need it in the first place? And so over the last 5 years, I've just been basically all day, every day, spending time learning more about it. And the thing that I love most is that I really feel like I've learned to see and understand how the world works around me better. It's given really great insight into, how things work. It invites you to ask really simple questions like, what is money? Why does it matter? How do our markets work? And that's the reason I love it the most. But ultimately, Comma Partners came about because as I was going through this deep dive over the years, I just fell in love and I became convinced that this was a massive opportunity, that a lot of things were going to change, and that it felt a lot like, what you'd read about or experienced in the internet wave. This new technologies here. It's still nascent. It's really exciting, but I think it's massive. And so I started a fund about a year and a half ago now, and we invest behind crypto in a liquid token format, which we can talk more about why I chose the liquid markets instead of the private markets. But that's what led to Comma, a deep belief and a love for this tech, and that it will change the world for the better, and it's a really important technology as well.
Well, tell us more about how you define the frontier between the community, technology, capital, and culture. How do all those things play together?
One of my favorite things about crypto is that when I have conversations with people about it, it goes in so many different directions. And I started to see myself, but even more so once I started to have conversations with people, that all these things really collided together in the technology, in the world of crypto. So crypto at its core is a coordination technology. And most or many of the most impactful technologies in human history were actually coordination technologies themselves. Everything from, the written language, the spoken word, money and monetary systems, the internet, railroads. If you think about it, what these things really did that changed the trajectory of our world, they enabled us to coordinate and connect different people, parts of the world better and more efficiently. And that is what crypto is, again, at the core. And so it is once you connect the world that you find where all these things that at the surface seem like they're disconnected, you see where they touch. And crypto really is this, it's often thought of just as an investment. Bitcoin, people think of, it's just something that you own, it's something you invest in, which is true. But the more you look, you realize Bitcoin and the technology that underlies it is, and I believe it is and will reshape everything, just like the internet did. At first, when the internet popped onto the scene, you might ask, okay, well, why does the pizza shop that's on my neighborhood, corner, why does it need to have its menu online? And then you fast forward 20 years. And of course, the internet is not just something where you post information and menus online, but it actually changed culture. It changed how we get news and information. It changed how economies work. It changed how cultural movements proliferate. And crypto at its core, I think is unleashing that similar kind of effect on the world.
Well, let's dive into that some more. Let's talk about the evolving role of crypto as both a financial and cultural asset class. It used to be just this financial tool, but it's, as you said, it's growing bigger. What do you think is the next phase or stage that we'll see coming out of it?
It does build really nicely on this point that we just touched on. Let's take prediction markets as an example.
Yeah.
Prediction markets are fascinating because they take something that, again, at on its face, it looks like you can look at it as two things. You can look at it as, oh, it's just a place where people are betting on things. It's a gambling mechanism, or it's sort of this media outlet. It's where we're aggregating information and finding insight. And so, like, if we look at it, it's actually both of those things at the same time. It is the collision of a financial investable asset class. It's something you can wager money on, you can invest behind a point of view. But the results of that, of a decentralized way where many, many people are staking their claim on a point of view or on a question in a particular market, you actually get to better insights and information that results. So, prediction markets are this fascinating example of where the financial side and so the media, even cultural side are coming together and they actually improve one another. So if you have a point of view and you want to make it known, you can actually benefit from that now because you can stake a claim, you can wager it. And then vice versa, because you have people that are putting real money on the line, there's a real cost to it. So on a whole, the system gets to better insights. It gets to truth more effectively along the way. So that's just one example, but I think it's catching people by surprise, the extent to which it is reshaping and going to reshape how markets are media and how media are markets.
Right. Well, let's talk about the financial aspect. I mean, in the early days of crypto, it was downgraded because it couldn't process a transaction as fast as a credit card could. But today, with stable coins, we're seeing them actually move, trillions of dollars back and forth more securely. And seems like it's grown in its strength financially by finding the right application is one. But what else do you see going on there?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Where the technology itself, Bitcoin was the spawn of this industry that we now call the crypto industry. And it did some things really well, like store value and make it sort of like digitally legible, global. But it did other things, arguably pretty poorly. To your point, transaction costs were pretty high, its throughput was low. But like with any technology, what you see is the space rallying behind the possibilities and taking different stances on how this technology can be improved and evolved. So, where Bitcoin, some would argue, fell short in terms of how fast and how cheaply it can proliferate information, you have projects like Ethereum and Solana that worked to improve on some of those features that they felt like were insufficient with Bitcoin. And you make certain trade-offs, but you have this really robust and dynamic ecosystem where developers are funneling in, and crypto is now much bigger, right? As a result, people come in and they see something that changed the world, this
Well,
blockchain technology, and they're finding ways to expand it.
right. And so one of the technologies that came out were NFTs, and there for a while, people were paying, huge amounts of money, at least in dollar terms, for these NFTs. And then, of course, the market shot up and then crashed down. How do you identify investable communities and tools in this crypto world? What frameworks do you use for that?
We're always going to have booms and busts. In any market that you make more accessible and lower friction, you're going to have moments of, exuberance and then crashing back down. And the NFT example was one of them, right? I actually still believe in NFTs. That's maybe one of my more contrarian views within crypto. And we could go deeper into that if it's interesting, but the NFT itself is a technology. We had one attempt, we've seen one sort of way that the NFTs have been utilized, which is as proxies for art. But the technology itself of a non-fungible token, we use them all the time. A concert ticket is an NFT. Now we just haven't called it as such, right? Like if I'm in row 12 seat C and you're in row 9 seat A, like those are non-fungible, they're different, but the ticket itself has some limitations. So the NFT itself enables communities to really accomplish what they were doing already, trying to find ways to involve and engage the world in, their fans in their world, and making it frictionless. And you can do new and interesting things with it because they're programmable. So the possibilities of what you can build with a non-fungible token, are much bigger than we had in the analog world prior.
So we've been talking about financing capital. What about media? How does this come into the picture and how does one impact the other?
Again, I look to prediction markets as an example of how this is working. So our news and media landscape as we know it, has problems. As we've made a ton of progress over the last, call it 10 or 20 years, where platforms like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter enabled anyone with the point of view to share it. But then the question becomes, you have greater access to information, but as a result, you have an overwhelming amount of information. And then the question becomes, how do you curate that information to find insight into what you care about? Because as we know, just because you give everyone a microphone, it doesn't mean the insights that they have, that they share through that microphone are any more or less valuable. So prediction markets are an example of saying, okay, well, how do you litigate what points of view are more valuable or correct, over others? And one very simple way is if you include economic incentives in any system, they get more accurate, right? And we haven't had the technology to do this on a micro basis. It was too expensive to charge people or have people litigate their perspectives in an open market. But now, because we've decreased the friction of these financial systems, you can have people wager fractions of a penny. And so when you blow open the surface area of how many people can participate with real skin in the game, in a cost on the line, you elevate the quality of what they're getting involved in. So I think over time, we'll see the entire media landscape change where there's now real cost on the line behind points of view. And I think as a result, we'll all benefit because we'll get to a better proxy for truth as this system has real incentives involved that aren't just clickbait and rage bait. I think it leads to a healthier insight in media environment.
I also see AI coming into the picture in some of these applications to solve certain applications or fix some gap. How do you see AI fitting into this?
AI will similarly reshape the world as we know it, right? And one interesting way to think about crypto is that if you really think about it, crypto wasn't, the technology itself wasn't even really built for humans. I mean, it was built for robots. It's money written in code, and we have to make it human legible so that we can interact with it. But in fact, you can argue that crypto is a system that's even better built for a world where you have AI agents, billions of them, sort of like operating on our behalf as our personal assistants. So I think, look, the robots will need money. They will need ways to economically transact in the world to make things happen. And not today, not a single traditional financial institution has the capability of enabling an AI agent to set up an account and transact with them. So that means we're going to need an entire new system, or you either reshape the system as we know it, which it's a tall task and we may get there, and or you look over here and you say there's this technology in this space called a crypto that is already open, free, permissionless, instantaneous, digital, and connected. And you say like that actually makes a ton of sense for how AI agents, may end up transacting in the world. So I think these things are related. I wouldn't say they're the same, but crypto solves a lot of the problems that a world full of AI and robotics, it solves a lot of the problems that these trends present.
Well, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about the regulatory trends going on. It's come a long ways, and it seemed like the regulatory environment is becoming more friendly to crypto. Where are we today with it, and what do we think we're going to see in the coming years here?
It has changed a ton. I mean, you went from a world where we had crypto institutions and individuals involved in the crypto space being debanked completely. I mean, you had a world where this was common practice, where as a crypto company, an individual invested in or involved in the crypto industry couldn't get a bank account. Like you were just sort of cast aside. That's an immensely dampening factor on the space, and it really deters a lot people from participating in it. And then you fast forward, call it a year, in this new administration, we have an entirely different world. We have the Genius Act, which passed this summer, which finally set up some rules for what constitutes a quote legal stablecoin, which is a huge swath of the crypto industry today. It's one of the strongest examples of product market fit within crypto. And we finally now have guidelines. For years, crypto companies were, even well-meaning ones, were just saying, we want to play by the rules. We don't know what the rules are. And rather than, in addition to not having rules, not only did we not know what these companies didn't know how they needed to operate within the world, they were in fact being prosecuted. So it was like this damned if we do, damned if we don't. We're trying to do the right thing. We don't even know how to do the right thing. And then on top of that, you're coming after us. And we just have a total 180 where the current administration is saying, we want to set rules that are sensible, that make sense, but also like prohibit innovation. They allow innovation and decrease the barriers to say, these founders want to come and build with this technology and make things useful. So the Genius Act was a big step forward. We have the Clarity Act, which is, going through the House right now, I believe, or maybe now it's in the Senate, and that will set the ground rules for the remainder of the crypto space. So everything that's non-stable coins, that'll say things like what's a security and what's not. And it again opens the door for both traditional and new financial institutions to increase access to these things. We're taking the lid off, and it's now finally legal. And again, that has these multiplicative benefits where you're now inviting founders and entrepreneurs to come in and build with this technology. Whereas before, we just had this stranglehold on the industry. So hugely productive.
Early on, there was a lot of discussion around what is a security and what is not. And it seemed like the government was pushing a round peg into a square hole, trying to make everything in crypto look like a security because they had rules around securities and the different rules they had there. Where are we with that discussion today?
It seems like it's been quite constructive. So I think the key factor here is defining what makes something sufficiently decentralized. That's one of the key attributes to determining security versus commodity, right? Like, is somebody in charge here? And based on what I'm seeing, the industry sort of share commentary and share thoughts on the markups of the Clarity Act, it looks like we're going in the right direction. It seems like the space, the founders and investors in the space that are involved with, having these conversations with regulators to set the rules are generally happy with, look, we're all aligned here. Even the founders and investors, they want to make sure that these rules come out and they do what they're supposed to do, create clarity, make sure markets are safe and people know what they're getting involved in, and contextualize the risks. And so I think that's a key one, right? They're saying, we understand, and a big part of crypto is promoting and valuing decentralized systems. So once we have those rules and teams and founders that are building, they know what determines, a security from commodity and how they'll be regulated as such, then it's on the founders to make decisions. Which one do we want to be? And then map their roadmaps to building a product, that fits in the part of the world that they seek to exist.
Great. Well, again, to switch to another topic, we discussed previously about the upcoming wealth transfer between boomers and to millennials. And I was surprised in many of the discussions I've had over the past few months where people have come to me, and I've found that many people in the financial industry are now engaged in generational transfers. Father built a business, the kids don't want it, now what? And so they're coming up with different solutions to gather those businesses, improve them, sell them, transfer them over to someone who does want to run them and so forth. But what's your take on the wealth transfer from boomers to millennials and how that's going to impact us?
I think it's a huge tailwind for crypto. Demographics really are destiny. And there are two things that I think that are really relevant for crypto when we think about demographics and the evolution here. The first is exactly what you're saying, which is there's a massive amount of capital that is going to change hands to a younger generation. millennials and younger, and just very candidly, they invest differently than their parents did. On the margin, they're crypto native. There's a whole generation now. Bitcoin was invented in 2009. So here we are 16 years on, right? And there's an entire generation where their total conscious lives, crypto has been a thing. Like you and I have had to get used to a world where crypto is a new thing and we have to make sense of like, is this real? Is it not? And again, it's just crazy to contextualize that there is a massive number of our young population for whom they just take it as given. Yeah, crypto is here. It's here to stay. And while that's an anecdote, I think it's really indicative of just how powerful this wealth transfer will be over the coming decades. As for every dollar that shifts from an older generation to a younger generation today, it probably rounds to 0%, the crypto allocation of that dollar. And would you say that the crypto allocation of the younger generation will be higher or lower? I think it's going to be higher, right?
Much higher. Yes, I agree. So what do you think is going to be the next stage here? We're quickly moving away from physical currencies. They just now in the US decided we're not going to have the penny anymore. I think we're the last developed country that had a penny. Everyone else, Canada and others, dropped it years ago. And, when you ever go pay out, everything's online at this point, as much as people want. Cash becomes this thing that's just increasingly harder to deal with because it's got a physical component to it. But what do you think is going to be the next step in this move toward a fully crypto society?
That's a big question. I mean, there's a lot there. I think the way that I like to think about the crypto space still, even 15, 16 years later, is that there's the Bitcoin side and then there's the everything else side. So, you're speaking to an increasingly digital economy. And I think Bitcoin's incredibly well positioned for that. The current narrative, look, Bitcoin's gone through a bunch of narratives in its history as we collectively try to figure out, what is this thing? What should it be? What does it do well? What does it not do well? But the current one, which is one that I very much agree with, I think it's right, is that Bitcoin is very much a digital gold. Or as one of the guys that I follow likes to say, it's gold with wings. Because everything gold does, Bitcoin can do better. You don't have to carry your gold bars, your Bitcoin bars around with you in your pocket, or have a physical safe, and you can send it anywhere in the world instantly, for a penny. So I think Bitcoin is incredibly well positioned as we look for the next version of like what should money look like? What should a store of value look like? And I think Bitcoin has a lot of those qualities. And then combined with the demographic shift, like we said, the world's still digesting it. It's still unfolding in real time. It's a very fast moving space. There's lots of innovation, and like it will take some time. Will it eclipse gold, tomorrow or next year? I don't know. But if I look back in 50 years and you were to ask me which market cap do I think is higher, Bitcoins or gold, I would say Bitcoins. And then on the other side, the everything else side, this is where the technology really gets to flex and touch all the other parts of the world. Everything from social media to culture and art with NFTs to, how we govern and organize groups, that the sky's the limit. And if you were to ask in the year 2000, what are the ways that the internet, this technology, is going to shape the world? Almost everyone got it wrong. I mean, even if they believed in the internet and you were trying to predict what we're going to invent, almost everyone got it wrong. Now, it is one of the, if not the most important questions to ask. So we should try to answer it. But the reality is we're going to be wrong. So the people that guessed what the internet was going to turn into were wrong. But if you still guessed the internet was important, you were right. And so I think we're going to see something similar here. We can and should try to imagine what crypto will look like, but I believe that crypto, the technology, is here to stay and will only be ever more important into the future.
Well, great. Well, I have one last question for you. And I remember in the early days of crypto, there was quite a bit of chaos around scams, rug pulls, hacks, other things that went on where people lost their crypto. The guy who lost his hard drive and, away went $255 million worth of value. What do you think the regulatory changes will be coming that will solve that aspect of it to make that a safer place to do business?
I think it's a natural part of any new frontier, right? And that's one of my words that I keep coming back to. Crypto, like any other new technology or movement, is very much a frontier. And the frontier means it's more volatile. There is some more risk there, right? So there will be risk. There will be scams, there will be bad actors in and around crypto. But the reality is if you look at the numbers, the pure number of, sort of bad incidents, bad actors that we fear in crypto is infinitesimally small compared to the number of bad actors and incidents that happen on technologies we're already used to using. Email, text, the internet. Like when we don't understand something or when it's new, we tend to default to fear. It's a natural human reaction. But the reality is there's risk everywhere. And we just tend to pay more attention to it in something like crypto. So it's going to evolve, and it's on founders, it's on us in the industry to build better systems, better projects, better products to protect people against these risks. And I think that's well underway. And at the same time, I think it's helpful to zoom out and just say there's risk everywhere. It happens, crime and theft happens using technologies as old as the telephone. And that's going to be a natural part. But it doesn't mean we should slow down the innovation. In fact, I think we should ramp it up because then we can work to solve those problems which are underway.
Right. Well, the last few minutes that we have here today, what else should we cover that we haven't?
I just think it's really important to zoom out and contextualize crypto, over call it a multi-decade period. And my best analog is the internet. There's something like $100 trillion plus. You could probably even increase that number if you looked at things like revenues in value that was created by the internet. I think very much crypto is on a trajectory to match or even surpass that level of significance. And to put it in context, its market cap today is right around $3 trillion. So that means we're only about 3% of the way there, right? That means there's a 33x ahead of us if you believe that crypto, is here to stay. And I do. And so when I really zoom out in an asset that is as volatile and explosive and exciting and fascinating as crypto, I just find it really important to zoom out and to ground in that bigger picture. And that bigger picture is we took the technology that built the internet and we solved some of its problems and made it better. Namely, that we can now not just exchange information, but also economic value. So it's a better technology than the internet, and it's on its way. And I think that's the opportunity that gets me really excited. And that's what I just think is really important to zoom out because it's so easy to get caught up in the headlines and the price swings and the volatility. So I think it's here to stay. It's a massive opportunity. It's what got me so excited in the first place, and it's what got me to make the jump and do this, full time with my work and my life.
Great. So how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Yeah, well, feel free to check out our site at www.comma.org. We do a bunch of writing on crypto markets, macro markets broadly. And my email is also devin@comma.org. So if you feel free to reach out anytime. I love having these conversations. I can talk about them all day long. So if any interest, give a shout.
Great. We'll include your contact details in the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope you have you back for a follow-up soon.
Thanks, all. Really appreciate it.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Hall T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.